All right, what's up, YouTube? This bike is a 2016 F800gs Adventure, or a GSA. It has an interesting problem that I have not encountered, but what it did was it did not want to come out of third gear. It took, I think, at times it'll just take a second hit to get down into second. It's always downshifting. Upshift's perfectly fine. But when downshifting, it will hang up. The best way to describe it is that it is as close as it can be to feeling like it goes into gear without going into gear, and it's absolutely maddening. I went and talked to BMW about it. The service guy that I talked to didn't seem to think that or be aware of any like known problem with this motor that could cause that. I was like, is this actually just is it how it is? Is it just these, oh yeah, these bikes have clunky shifting, they don't shift well? He said no. So then I went around to the parts desk, talked to them too. They also were like, yeah, we haven't heard about that. When I got the bike, it had been down. The shifter was quite bent. The brake lever was also bent. I mean, both sides had obviously seen the dirt, but the shifter was pretty tweaked. My best guess is something in these two is damaged. A couple notes on this job. You can potentially remove and retighten the main nut on the clutch basket without a special clutch tool by putting it, I guess, in gear and locking the rear brake. Getting it off, you could potentially impact wrench it, which is not my favorite thing to do because you would be putting all of that impact through the entire transmission. Yeah, it'll probably work. It's just really not, I'm not a big fan of putting impact forces like that through things that could become very expensive. And then the other thing, I saw a video of a guy trying to tighten the clutch basket nut while holding the rear brake, and they were not able to actually prevent it from spinning because the torque is, if off the top of my head, it's something like 130 foot-pounds, so it's quite a lot. So he ended up actually impacting it back on, which I also don't like because. So one of these, I'm going to try this guy. This is an EBC. It's a CTO 85. I think I was able to finally find like an accurate application list on EBC's site. It's not a very good site, but if you dig around, there is a catalog and you can actually find each one of the clutch tools and all the bikes underneath that it fits. So these are like 30 bucks. It does suck because they're somewhat bike specific, so you would have to buy one for each bike, so that's kind of a bummer, but they're at least not that expensive. So I'm going to try to use this to hold the clutch basket and actually torque it properly. The other thing to note before you start this is that to do it properly, all of the clutch cover little bolts and the clutch basket little spring bolts, the pressure plate bolts, they're all pretty low, like 10 or 12 Newton meter torque settings. So if you want to actually torque those correctly, you will need a small torque wrench. Mine only goes down to 10 foot-pounds. So if you have one of those and want to just say, oh yeah, just throw 10 foot-pounds on it, I would not do that because the actual torque is about 7. So if you do 10, you're adding something like 40% onto the actual torque that it's supposed to have, which is quite a lot more than it should be. So please don't do that. And if you actually want to do it right, I found on Amazon there was it's like 38 bucks. I got a little 10 to 200 inch-pound torque wrench, which is something like it'll go up to like 20 Newton meters or something like that, which puts me basically right over the edge into my next size up torque wrench. So I would recommend getting one of those. I'm overnighting it. I'll have it in the morning. They're pretty inexpensive, and it'll prevent you from breaking expensive things. The last thing I'm going to say before we actually start this video is this bike is filthy from the trip, and I should have washed it, and I neglected to do so. So now I'm going to wipe around the cover so I don't just have like little bits of dirt and mud falling inside as I work on it. So I would probably wash the bike and clean it up before, at least clean where you're working before you start. Okay, as usual, I've skipped through a couple of the more obvious, boring things. So to start out with, I had to take off my skid plate. If you have one, that'll probably be in the way of your big oil drain plug, which is right here. It's a regular Allen 10 millimeter. So pop that guy out, drain the oil, and then once that's drained, you can pretty much put that back in. I'm going to do that now just so I don't forget. The original washer is a little bit not quite as big of a diameter. The outer diameter is this one, but it should be measures out to a 25 mil, approximately 30 or 31 millimeter OD. So I think this one from my Toyota truck actually, for my diff plug, will actually work. So I'm going to replace it with that. And then your foot peg and kickstand assembly is in the way. The foot peg is on with a just a pin through it and a cotter pin. So pull out the cotter pin, pull out the pin. If it helps you, usually if you can like push on the peg and get pressure, since this spring is kind of pushing on this pin sideways, it makes it a little bit harder to get out. Or you can tap it out with a little pin. I was able to just push it out by hand, just by kind of pushing on the peg and releasing some of that friction off of the pin. That should slide out. Then that gets out of the way of the lower bolt. Then there's two big Torx head bolts there. That comes out of the way. There's a little kickstand plug that you can pull off. There's a tab on the back that you can, I think it depresses. Can't remember exactly how, but you can pull a little plug off and then you can remove that whole assembly. And then there is going to be obviously your little bolt in the shifter. I'll have to disconnect this clutch cable right here, which looks to be pretty straightforward. Not really anything in the way there. Then there is a little clip down here that basically prevents the little end of the cable from popping out. You just close the two tabs and then I can push it out. And that little clip comes out of there. So set that aside, and then from there with the cable slack, you can just pull that end out, the slot in the back. And then it's just going to be removing all these little perimeter bolts all the way around. I've already had this draining for a while and the oil level is already way lower than this cover, so I'm not worried about that now. So I'm going to put the plug back in and just tighten it and torque it properly so I don't forget. It is 40 Newton meters or 29.5 foot-pounds, and I'll probably put a little note on that somewhere in here. If you've ever watched my seal installation videos, I typically use tape. There is a little groove in the back where you can kind of put the edge of the tape and kind of push it into the groove so the seal doesn't catch the edge of the tape and try to peel it up. That way it should just go over it easily, and the tape will protect the seal from the splines. So just clean off the shift shaft a bit and then put just a single layer of tape so it's not too thick. I'm going to put a little dab of oil so it slides over it easily. Okay, so when taking off the cover, you may have to wiggle the clutch arm a little bit because there's a flat on the shaft there that engages with this little slot, and this is it pulls on this when you rotate that arm. It actually is what disengages the pressure plate. What's funny is this actually looks like it can come all the way out without even taking out the clutch. I did not expect that because this actually popped out of place even when I was taking off the cover. Something to note is that there is a washer right here. Uh, this is where this snap ring sits on the shift shaft. Make sure that this goes back on. Number one, if you don't put the washer in there, you will have movement side to side because you're losing a little bit of space, or you're gaining more space there. And number two, that you're then going to have a snap ring rubbing against the aluminum of the case, and you really don't want that. So make sure that little thin washer goes back into place when you put it back together. And yeah, the star is basically buried underneath there, where there's also oil pump gears in there too. So yeah, I still have to totally take this off, but I will take a peek at the shaft here, and there is a pretty good ding in the bottom of that. That is definitely not supposed to be there. And then I didn't notice the other side until I actually looked at it more closely without the camera. So this is how it would sit in the bike. When you're downshifting, you'd be pushing this way. So I would expect this top one to have a problem, and that is the ding side. Interestingly, the bottom side does have a smooth slight dish to it. And I'm unsure if that is just normal wear. It's pushing on the pin like that. It's pushing down on the pin to shift it. So I would have expected that one to be the messed up one, but it's definitely messed up. Let's be clear there, but not as bad as I thought. But I have not seen. But the star is the main thing that I'm wondering is the actual problem. But there is some trauma on that part for sure. All right, here we go again because I forgot to turn the microphone on. Nice. Anyway, I decided to get a second opinion today. So thank you guys at A&S BMW in Roseville for being cool and taking a few minutes to give me a little consultation about the bike, just because I've been in a bunch of bikes before, but not this one. And I wanted to find out for sure if what I was seeing was normal or not. So I actually spoke with the head of the service department, I think, and then I spoke to, I think it was his master tech that has replaced a couple of these mechanisms on, I don't know about this bike, but other bikes. And he said that it looked pretty normal, because I was also explaining, I'm like, yeah, it's probably going to be better when it's warm with oil, things are spinning and rotating, the gears are going to want to mesh obviously better than me just like moving the rear wheel around when it's dry. So he said it looked pretty normal. He did say it's about 9 out of the 10 times they've had to replace them. It's a problem with the shifter arm and not the shift star, since that is kind of the stronger point. The shift star seems like it's really hard material. I don't know what it is. It's cast, but it's obviously really hard. And this seems like more of a mild steel that will definitely bend and mash easier. One thing he did say is that the solid piece here, this plate that is welded to the shaft, he's seen these actually crack at the welds and cause shift issues. So I can't really see that in here. But he said when they get mashed, like if the shifter's out here, if it gets mashed into the case, this will actually push on the star and tweak it and potentially crack it. And it could make it either completely broken or make it weaker, make it misaligned so it doesn't move properly. But he said it's almost always these. So I am going to just replace this guy. Okay, so I couldn't find the torque spec on this bolt here on the shift star, but it is a long M6, and since the pressure plate bolts are 10 Newton meters and then these case bolts are 12, so I just torqued that to 12 Newton meters. I'm not totally sure. It did not seem super tight when I took it off, so 12 seemed pretty reasonable judging by the amount of force I was using. You're probably wondering what this is. This is a little piece of aluminum angle. I chopped one side so it could sit closer to the star, and I actually aligned it through two of the pins like this, offset, and I didn't use this pin to torque against. I used the bottom of the case here. I had it rotated a little bit, but I had it here, and then that allowed access to the bolt head. If it's too long and you try something that's wider like that, I couldn't get my socket to fit all the way to the bolt, so that's why I chopped it shorter. But yeah, this was just a super easy tool that I made, and that worked totally fine. And it's aluminum, so not a lot of torque either, so it's not going to damage anything. And that worked great. So I'm going to put this back together, and hopefully my shift problems are fixed, and I get the joy of cleaning off the old gasket first. Fantastic. I think I got all the gasket stuff off. One interesting thing is that if anybody knows what this little cavity is here, I'd be interested in knowing, because as far as I can tell, there's nothing here. This is completely dry. There's no port back in here. It's all solid. The cover just blocks it. The gasket goes around it. It's pretty funny because there's just nothing there. And I know that this motor and block is like, I think it's like the same that's used like the 650 and the 700. So on one of those other motors or other years or something, I'm wondering if there's like something going on there. But in this motor, it's just like blocked off. I don't know. It's pretty funny. Just I'm like, what's the point? Why wouldn't the cover just go right here on this part? But it goes all the way over here. I wonder if it's like purely for looks or something. I don't know. It doesn't do anything. Anyway, on to putting the clutch on. So you got the main bearing back in there that's in the case, and there's gonna be this big washer that should go in first. Got a big washer there. I never took that out. Then there's one needle bearing. Then you got a little plastic bushing, little spacer bushing in between, and then needle bearing number 2. And that'll put you flush with this shoulder right here next to the splines. So those should all be in there, and I'm going to put the basket back, and I'm gonna put the shift shaft in. Well, should I put the shift shaft in now? I guess I could put it in now. You can also totally put it in after. It doesn't really matter. So it's now, you might have to rotate the outer basket because there's a big gear around the back of the basket that meshes with a gear in the front here. Yeah, there it goes. I actually had to use the clutch tool to rotate it a bit before it would go on. There it goes. I think that's it. Seems like it's all the way back. This gear isn't meshed with that. The shifter is still in place, so that's where it's supposed to be. You can pull the shifter off now, and then once again, make sure this little washer is on your shift shaft before you put this back together, or you're gonna have a bad day. don't forget to put your little clutch disengagement shaft that pulls out on the pressure plate, put that back in before you put the pressure plate on. I'm just going to wipe, I got a little bit of residue on there, some of that Loctite junk out of there, any leftovers, and then this should be Loctited with red, like that, the more permanent stuff. Clean the nut out too. And then this is just a wave washer. It doesn't really look like it matters which way it goes. You can see there's a pretty good bend in that. That is by design, so it's basically keeping pressure on the nut, but there's a pretty obvious side that you can see the nut imprint. Same with the nut, it's pretty obvious it went that way, so not that it really matters, but I'm going to put it back the same way. Dabble do ya. I wonder if I can get it right in the, I don't know if I want to put that much torque through that bolt head. Yeah, it's unfortunate. The other clutch tool I have actually has a square hole to where it looks like you could put a socket in there. Oh, interesting. I think I actually bent the handle. I don't think it was like that. I think I bent the handle probably when I took it off. That's funny. Okay, so here's my modification. I'm going to rotate this a bit so I don't hit this little bump in the lower part of the case with the bolt head on the other side. And I'm going to use these to space it out a little bit. Okay, like that. A regular M10 so I don't ruin the actual foot peg bolt. Make sure I don't clip that little wire. That's actually got a double function. It's actually straightening the tool as well. Put a little bit of rag in between. I'll see if this is going to actually hold that for me. There it went. All right, so I guess there's a hack for you if you have one of these stupid EBC tools, just like that, and eliminate this useless handle. This outer plate looks like it's actually got a little bit of a narrower tab, so it has a little bit too much play if you put it in the wrong spot. But if you rotate it into that gap, then it fits very tight and there's like no play side to side. So remember that. This has to sit with the slot facing at kind of like a 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock direction, so it can slide into the appropriate spot on the shaft and the cover. And then I'm going to add some tape here. When I add the tape again, I'm going to tape just shy of this tapered spot on it, that second groove in. So when the cover goes past, or it will go past it, and I can pull the tape off easily. I just really need to cover up the sharp area on the splines. I'm not really concerned about the rest of it. So then I'll just kind of wisp that down into a little point, kind of. And again, we'll put a little oil on it. I'll do a double check. The shift star is already torqued. The washer is on the shift shaft. This is in and oriented correctly. This is taped. I think I need a gasket. That might help. And then we'll be good to put this back. Also make sure you've got your 2 locator dowels there. going to help hold this gasket in place anyway, so it's going to be a little bit more difficult if you don't have them there. You'll probably notice. And then this clutch arm needs to be basically parallel to the gasket surface roughly. Otherwise, it'll interfere with the clutch shaft when you try to put it on. So you may need to wiggle it a little bit. Feel it kind of fighting me there. Yep, and now this is a test, just kind of, you can see that's engaged, so it's pushing the case away, so when it's bolted in, it will pull the pressure plate properly. So make sure you are engaged there. All of these bolts are the same. You can put them in anywhere you want. I'm going to put them in, couple in lightly and make sure that the gasket is in the right spot. On this side, it was kind of hanging, it was kind of misaligned.